The sun was just beginning to set over Beverly Hills, bathing the skyline in gold as luxury cars lined the circular driveway of the Langford Grand, one of the most exclusive hotels in the city. Owned by billionaire real estate mogul Richard Langford, the hotel wasn't just a place to stay. It was a symbol of power, wealth, and the kind of privilege only a few could afford. The lobby was a cathedral of excess, marble floors polished so perfectly they reflected the towering crystal chandelier overhead. Staff moved with military precision, their smiles rehearsed, their uniforms spotless. This was a hotel where celebrities, tech billionaires, and foreign royalty came to play. And tonight, the guest who walked through the revolving glass doors should have caused a stir. But he didn't. Tom Cruise stepped inside alone, dressed casually, dark jeans, a worn leather jacket, and sunglasses. No entourage, no cameras trailing behind him. Just a quiet confidence and the unmistakable ease of a man who knew who he was, whether anyone else did or not. At the front desk stood Madison, a receptionist who prided herself on spotting VIPs the moment they walked in. She knew the regulars, the hedge fund CEOs, the Instagram-famous influencers, the aging rock stars clinging to relevance. But when she looked up and saw Tom, she barely gave him a second glance. Just another tourist, she thought. Maybe someone who got lost on their way to a cheaper hotel. Tom approached the desk with a polite smile. "Good evening," he said, his voice calm and friendly. "Any chance I could grab a table at your rooftop restaurant?" Madison's smile instantly stiffened into that look, the one hotel staff save for people they assume don't belong. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, already turning to check her computer screen, even though she knew the answer. "The rooftop is reservation only." Tom didn't argue, didn't flash his trademark smile, or drop his name. "Oh, I understand," he said, nodding. "What about booking a room? I can check in first, then maybe get a table later." That's when everything changed, because before Madison could answer, a man in a tailored navy suit strolled into the lobby, his Italian loafers clicking against the marble. Richard Langford, the billionaire CEO and owner of the hotel himself. He overheard the conversation and stopped in his tracks, giving Tom a quick once-over. What Langford saw was not one of his people. He saw a man in off-the-rack clothes, no designer watch, and, worst of all, someone who didn't seem desperate to impress him. Langford smirked. "This is first-class hospitality, son," he said, his voice loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "We don't have rooms available for walk-ins, and we certainly don't hand out rooftop tables to just anyone." A few guests nearby glanced over, intrigued by the unfolding scene. Tom stood there, calm as ever. No flash of anger, no defense, just a quiet smile. Because what was about to happen next would turn the whole lobby upside down. Richard Langford stood tall, arms folded across his chest, wearing the smugness of a man who believed every inch of this marble palace existed because of him. The Langford Grand wasn't just his hotel. It was his kingdom. Every chandelier, every imported vase, every perfectly polished countertop was a reflection of his wealth, his taste, his power. And in his mind, power meant control. Control over who belonged and who didn't. The moment his eyes landed on Tom Cruise, dressed like a man who'd walked in off the street, Langford made a decision. This man was not his type of guest. No tailored suit, no shiny cufflinks, no diamond-encrusted watch begging to be noticed. Just a guy, a regular guy, not worth his time. "Look," Langford said, stepping closer to the front desk, speaking loudly enough for anyone nearby to hear. This isn't one of those places where you just stroll in and expect a table because you're feeling lucky. Tom stood there, still smiling politely, hands resting casually in his jacket pockets. "No offense," Langford continued, fully meaning to offend. "But we have a certain standard at the Langford. Our restaurant is fully booked for months, and we don't take walk-in guests in our top suites either." Madison shifted uncomfortably behind the desk. She wasn't sure who this man was, but even she thought Langford was laying it on a little thick. Tom nodded, unbothered. "Fair enough. I understand." But Langford wasn't done. "You know what the real problem is these days," Langford said, now addressing anyone within earshot. "Places like this used to mean something. Now you've got, well..." He gestured at Tom, making a point of sweeping his eyes up and down his casual outfit. "Now anyone with a credit card and a dream thinks they can walk in and pretend they belong." A few nearby guests chuckled, eager to laugh along with the billionaire who signed their company's contracts. Tom? He just smiled. That same calm, almost amused smile. "Thanks for your time," Tom said softly. "I appreciate the honesty." Then, as if nothing had happened, he turned as if to walk toward the door. Langford, satisfied with his public display of dominance, smiled like a man who had just won something. But he had no idea. The game was just beginning. Before Tom could leave, a young bellhop, barely out of his teens, rushed forward, nearly tripping over his own feet. His wide eyes locked onto Tom's face like he was seeing a ghost. He wasn't old enough to know all the hotel's wealthy regulars. But this face had stared back at him from movie posters his entire life. "Oh my God," the bellhop whispered, barely able to contain himself. That's Tom Cruise." Madison's head snapped up so fast her hair nearly whipped her face. "What?" She leaned forward, peering at Tom again, this time really looking. The smile, the unmistakable jawline, the effortless confidence, her face drained of color. "Wait," she stammered, her voice cracking. You're... Langford, hearing the commotion, rolled his eyes. "Tom Cruise, please." He gave a dismissive laugh, waving off the very idea. Tom Cruise wouldn't come to my hotel dressed like that. But the guests nearby had already pulled out their phones. Google searches were happening in real time. Photos were being compared. Murmurs were turning into buzzing excitement. That's when Langford's phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out. A text from the hotel's board of directors. A single message. "Tom Cruise is staying at the hotel this weekend. Personal friend. Make sure he's treated like royalty." Langford's smile froze. The color drained from his face. He slowly looked up, locking eyes with Tom Cruise, the man he had just humiliated, in front of everyone. Tom stood there, hands still tucked in his pockets, calm as ever. Langford's stomach dropped. Before Langford could stammer out some awkward apology, the hotel's head of security entered the lobby. A former Secret Service agent, the security chief moved like a man who knew how to command a room without raising his voice. His sharp eyes landed on Tom Cruise immediately, and in that second, he knew. He walked straight toward Tom, stopping just short of Langford. "Mr. Cruise," he said with a respectful nod, "we are so sorry for the confusion." Langford opened his mouth to explain, but the security chief wasn't done. "On behalf of the entire staff," the chief continued, "I'd like to personally escort you to the penthouse suite, the one that's been reserved for you since your team called ahead last week." Langford's mouth dropped open. The guests who had laughed with him moments earlier were now silent, staring in disbelief. "And as for the rooftop restaurant," the chief added, "we'll have a private table ready for you in the next 10 minutes. Of course, all charges are on the house." Langford could feel the heat rising up his neck, his perfectly rehearsed CEO smile crumbling into a twisted grimace. Tom, still completely calm, shook the security chief's hand. "Thank you. That's very kind." Then he turned toward Langford, who looked like he wanted to melt into the marble floor. "No hard feelings," Tom said softly, his voice friendly, but with just enough weight to make the words sting. Langford opened his mouth, trying to summon an apology or excuse, but nothing came out. Tom simply smiled, gave him a polite nod, and walked toward the private elevator reserved for VIP guests only. The doors slid shut, and Tom Cruise was gone. The silence in the lobby was deafening. Langford stood there, humiliated in front of his staff, his guests, and his own ego. He had spent years building this hotel into a temple for the elite, and in one careless moment, he had just insulted the very kind of guest his hotel was built to impress. The guests went back to their drinks. Madison tried to disappear behind the desk, and Langford? He stood there, still clutching his useless sense of importance, learning the most expensive lesson of his life. Never judge a guest by their clothes, because you never know who just walked through your door.